I still remember the day I met Daniel, a chance encounter at the coffee shop where I worked my morning shift. He was this lanky guy with tousled dark hair, glasses perpetually sliding down his nose, clutching a stack of textbooks like they were his lifeline. The way he ordered his coffee, precise, methodical, with this tiny hesitation before speaking, told me he measured his words carefully, a trait I'd come to both love and resent over the years. "Large Americano, please. Extra shot. No room for cream." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. His voice had this quiet confidence beneath the academic exhaustion. His flannel shirt was worn at the elbows, and his jeans had that faded look of being washed one too many times. Not poor, exactly, just careful with money. I'd learn later how that came from growing up with parents who counted every penny, who'd drummed into him that education was the only escape route from a life of financial insecurity. I don't know what made me write my number on his cup that day. Maybe it was the way he actually looked at me while ordering, not through me like I was just another service worker. Maybe it was how he thanked me by name, having read my tag. Or maybe it was just that moment when our fingers brushed during the handoff, and I felt something electric, something real. "I'm Rachel," I said, though my name tag already announced this fact. "Daniel," he replied with a half smile. "Thanks for the coffee and the number." 3 days later, he called. 6 months later, we were inseparable. 2 years later, we were married in a simple ceremony at the city courthouse, with only our closest friends as witnesses. I was 22, he was 24, and we both believed we had our whole lives mapped out before us. "We're going to build something amazing. Together," he promised that night in our tiny one-bedroom apartment, the moonlight painting silver streaks across our secondhand furniture. "I'm going to finish my degree, start my own company, and you'll never have to worry about anything ever. Again." I believed him with the wholehearted faith of someone who hadn't yet learned how easily promises crack under pressure. I still worked at the coffee shop then, but had also picked up evening shifts at a local restaurant. The tips were good, and between the two jobs, we managed to keep our heads above water while Daniel finished his undergraduate degree in computer science. The plan was simple. He'd graduate, get a good job in tech, and then I'd go back to school. I'd always wanted to study literature, maybe become a teacher someday. We'd take turns supporting each other's dreams. That was the promise we made, sitting cross-legged on our lumpy mattress, sharing a bottle of $7 wine to celebrate his acceptance to a prestigious graduate program. "It's only 2 more years," he said, eyes bright with ambition. "Then it's your turn, Rachel. I promise." I nodded, believing every word. "We're a team," I said, lifting my plastic cup in toast. "Your success is my success." The graduate program was more demanding than we anticipated. The coursework consumed him, and the networking events and study groups stretched late into the night. I'd come home from my second shift at 11 p.m. to find him hunched over his laptop, empty coffee cups scattered around him like casualties. "You should sleep," I'd whisper, massaging his tense shoulders. "Can't," he'd mutter, not looking up. This project could be my breakthrough. I'd kiss the top of his head and crawl into bed alone, too exhausted to wait up for him. The alarm would ring at 4:30 a.m., and I'd drag myself to the coffee shop for another day of serving strangers who barely registered my existence. My hands began to show the strain. Cracked skin from constant washing, a burn on my wrist from a coffee machine mishap that never quite healed properly. But I never complained. This was our plan. This was our future I was building. One latte, one dinner, service at a time. "You're working too hard," my friend Jess told me over a rare lunch break we managed to coordinate. She worked at the restaurant with me, had seen the toll the double shifts were taking. When was the last time you did something for yourself? Stirred my soup absently. It's temporary. Once Daniel graduates and gets established, I'll have my turn. Jess gave me a look I couldn't quite decipher. And when exactly will that be? 2 years, I said automatically. Maybe a bit more if he does that startup accelerator program he's been talking about. Rachel, Jess said, reaching across the table to cover my chapped hand with her smooth 1. You've been saying 2 years for the past 3 years. I pulled my hand away, feeling a flicker of irritation. That's how investments work, Jess. You put in the effort first, then you reap the rewards later. Daniel's going to change our lives with this degree. What I didn't tell her was how the interest on our student loans was accumulating faster than we could keep up with. How I'd started picking up catering gigs on weekends just to make the minimum payments. How I'd given up on even small luxuries, new clothes, movies, dinner out, to funnel every spare dollar into Daniel's education. His success is my success, I repeated to myself on particularly grueling days, when my feet throbbed so badly I had to soak them in ice water just to fall asleep. When my manager at the restaurant commented on the dark circles under my eyes, suggesting I put in more effort with my appearance. When I missed my sister's baby shower because I couldn't afford to take the time off or buy a gift. I told myself it would all be worth it in the end. Daniel's final semester arrived with a flurry of activity. He was working on his master's project, some cutting-edge algorithm that could revolutionize data processing for artificial intelligence systems. I didn't fully understand the technicalities, but I understood his passion, the way his eyes lit up when he explained it. This could be big, Rachel, he said one night, actually leaving his workstation to join me for dinner. My professor thinks it has commercial applications. He's introducing me to some investors next week. I felt a surge of pride. That's amazing. I always knew you could do it. He reached across our small kitchen table and squeezed my hand. For a moment, he really saw me. My exhaustion, my dedication, all of it. None of this would be possible without you, he said softly. I know these past few years have been hard, but it's all about to pay off, I promise. I never doubted it, I replied, meaning every word. The investor meeting went even better than expected. Daniel came home vibrating with excitement, his words tumbling over each other as he explained how they wanted to fund his project, help him develop it into a full-fledged startup. There was talk of incubators, seed funding, equity stakes, terms that swirled around me in an incomprehensible cloud. They're offering a signing bonus, he said, finally slowing down. $50,000, Rachel, just to get started. I collapsed onto our sofa, the numbers not quite registering. 50,000? That's more than I make in a year at both jobs combined. I know. He knelt before me, taking both my hands in his. His face was transformed by joy, years of stress momentarily erased. This is it, Rachel. This is what we've been working for. We can pay off some of the loans, maybe even move to a better apartment. Or I could start taking classes, I suggested, quietly. Maybe just part-time at first while I keep the coffee shop job. A flicker of something. Hesitation. Concern. Passed across his face, but it was gone so quickly I thought I might have imagined it. Of course, he said, squeezing my hands. We'll figure it all out. This is just the beginning. The next few months passed in a whirlwind. Daniel graduated. With honors, his startup secured its initial funding, and he was suddenly in demand. Meetings with tech bigwigs, conferences, networking events. Our apartment became a transitional space, somewhere he passed through between more important destinations. Quit the restaurant job, thinking I'd finally have time to look into college applications. But somehow, there was always a reason to delay. Daniel needed help preparing for a big presentation. The startup needed someone to handle administrative tasks until they could afford a proper office manager. We needed to maintain our income. A bit longer, just until the company found its footing. Just a few more months, became Daniel's new refrain. This is the most critical time for a startup. We can't afford distractions. I told myself not to feel hurt when he called my education a distraction. He didn't mean it that way. He was just focused, driven. It was what made him special. What would ultimately give us the life we'd dreamed of. Then came the day that changed everything. Daniel burst into our apartment like a thunderclap, his energy filling every corner of our small space. We got the Series A funding, he shouted, lifting me off my feet and spinning me around. $15 million, Rachel. Can you believe it? I couldn't. The number was too large to comprehend, like trying to count stars in the night sky. That's incredible, I managed, my voice faint. The board wants us to relocate to the West Coast, he continued, barely pausing for breath. They're offering a substantial relocation package. We could have a real house, Rachel, not an apartment, a house. I felt a ripple of unease beneath my happiness. When would we need to move? As soon as possible. 2 weeks, ideally. He finally registered my expression. I know it's fast, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We can't pass it up. What about my college applications? I was going to apply for the spring semester. Here, he waved a hand dismissively. There are better schools in California anyway. You can apply there instead. He pulled me close, kissing my forehead. This is happening, Rachel. Everything we worked for is finally paying off. I pushed down my doubts, focusing instead on the shine in his eyes, the genuine happiness radiating from him. After years of struggle, how could I begrudge him this moment? Let's do it, I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. California, here we come. California was nothing like I'd imagined. The company put us up in a sleek, modern house in San Francisco, all glass and sharp angles, with views of the bay that still took my breath away weeks after we moved in. The furniture was delivered and arranged by a professional decorator. Cleaning service came twice a week. For the first time in years, my hands began to heal. No more chemical burns, no more cracked skin. I should have been happy. This was the reward we'd worked for, wasn't it? The culmination of all those double shifts, all those lonely nights. But as Daniel was swept deeper into the startup world, I found myself becoming more ghost than wife. His schedule filled with meetings, business dinners, industry events, places where I was technically welcome, but increasingly felt out of place. The first time he suggested I skip a company dinner, it seemed reasonable enough. It's just going to be technical discussions about the next development sprint, he explained, adjusting the collar of a shirt that cost more than a week of my old salary. You'd be bored out of your mind. I nodded, relieved not to face another evening of conversations that flew over my head, of pitying glances from the wives of other executives, women with advanced degrees, impressive careers, confident voices. The second time was a networking event at a trendy rooftop bar. These things run late, and you've mentioned how tired you've been lately, he said, not meeting my eyes as he gathered his keys. Why don't you take a night for yourself? Read that book you've been wanting to start. By the 4th or 5th time, we'd stopped pretending it was about my comfort. Daniel was moving in circles where I didn't belong, and we both knew it. I did eventually enroll in community college courses, basic prerequisites I could transfer to a 4-year program eventually. Daniel made encouraging noises when I mentioned it, but never asked about my classes, never noticed when I stayed up late studying. 6 months after our move, I barely recognized my husband. The lanky, uncertain graduate student had been replaced by a confident CEO in tailored suits who spoke the language of venture capital and market disruption as naturally as breathing. His glasses were gone, replaced by contact lenses. His hair was styled by an expensive barber. Even his posture had changed. Straighter, more commanding. I was proud of him, of course I was. but I also felt myself fading in his new world, becoming less substantial with each passing day. "You seem different," I ventured one rare evening when we were both home, eating takeout at our immaculate dining table. He looked up from his phone, where he'd been answering emails between bites. "Different how?" I struggled to articulate the distance I felt growing between us. "Just, I don't know. Like you're becoming someone else." He set down his phone, giving me his full attention for the first time in weeks. "I'm still me, Rachel. I'm just the version of me I always wanted to be. The version you helped me become." His words should have comforted me, but something in his tone raised goosebumps on my arms. "We hardly see each other anymore," I said softly. "I miss you." He reached across the table, taking my hand. The gesture was familiar, but his touch felt different, his palm smoother, his grip less certain, as if he wasn't sure how much pressure to apply anymore. "Things will settle down once we get through this growth phase," he promised. "The company needs me right now, that's all." I nodded, wanting to believe him. That night in bed, he turned to me with a hunger that had been absent for months. But even as our bodies moved together in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was making love to a memory. The Rachel who had written her number on his coffee cup. The Rachel who had believed in him when no one else did. Not the woman I had become, adrift in a life I hadn't chosen. Afterward, as he slipped into sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was what success was supposed to feel like. This hollow ache beneath my ribs, this sense of something precious slipping through my fingers no matter how tightly I tried to hold on. I didn't know it then, but we were already ending. The real devastation was still to come, along with the realization that the man I'd sacrificed everything for was capable of cruelties I never could have imagined from the boy in the flannel shirt with the careful smile. But that night, watching the rise and fall of his chest in the dim light, I still believed we could find our way back to each other. I still believed in the promises we'd made. I still believed that the years of sacrifice would lead to the life we'd dreamed of building together. I had no idea how wrong I was. The first sign something was truly wrong came on a foggy Tuesday morning. I had been in California for almost a year by then, trying to build some semblance of a life while Daniel disappeared deeper into his startup world. I'd just dropped him off at the airport for yet another business trip. Seattle this time, some major potential client he couldn't name because of NDAs. That morning, after watching his plane take off, I decided to stop at a small bakery we'd discovered during our first week in the city, back when we still did things together. The bell chimed softly as I pushed open the door, inhaling the comforting scent of fresh bread and cinnamon. "The usual for you and Mr. Whitman?" asked the owner, an elderly man with flour-dusted hands and kind eyes. We'd become something like regulars during those early weeks, Daniel always ordering the almond croissant, me the pain au chocolat. "Just for me today," I replied, forcing a smile. "Daniel's traveling again." The baker nodded sympathetically, his eyes crinkling at the corners. So much travel these days. He was in here with his colleague just last night, looking rushed as usual. I froze, my credit card halfway to the reader. "Last night? Are you sure?" "Oh, yes," the baker continued, oblivious to my sudden stillness. "Around 8 p.m., the young lady was trying to get him to try the raspberry tart, but he insisted on his almond croissant. Creatures of habit, you business people." My mind raced, trying to find an innocent explanation. Daniel had told me he was working late at the office, preparing for his 7 a.m. flight. He'd texted at 9:30 saying he was heading home soon. I'd fallen asleep before he arrived, exhausted from a day of classes and housework. "The young lady," I repeated, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "Was she tall? Dark hair? Always perfectly styled?" The baker nodded. "That's the one. Very elegant. I assumed she works with your husband, Olivia Chen, the company's VP of Business Development. I'd met her at the holiday party, where she'd air-kissed my cheeks and commented on my quaint dress, a backhanded compliment that had made me feel even more out of place among the tech elite. "Thank you," I managed, accepting my change with numb fingers. "I forgot I have somewhere to be." I left without my pastry, the bell's cheerful chime now grating against my frayed nerves. Back in our sleek modern house, I stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing. It could be innocent, I told myself, a work meeting over pastries. Though why hadn't he mentioned it? And why let me believe he was at the office when he wasn't? I opened my laptop and checked our joint credit card statement, the one we'd maintained since our struggling student days. Most of Daniel's expenses now went on his corporate card, but he occasionally used our personal one out of habit. There it was, a charge from last night at Maison Bleue, an upscale French restaurant downtown. $347.80 for pastries. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I debated my next move. This wasn't me. I wasn't the suspicious wife who snooped through her husband's things. We had built our relationship on trust and mutual support. But something had shifted, hadn't it? The Daniel who had left this morning with a distracted kiss on my forehead wasn't the same Daniel who had held my hand across our tiny kitchen table and promised me the world. Before I could reconsider, I found myself opening his desk drawer. It was meticulously organized, color-coded files, expensive pens lined up like soldiers, business cards in a leather holder. Nothing incriminating, nothing personal at all, really. It struck me how little of the man I married remained in these possessions. At the back of the drawer, I found an unmarked key. It looked like it belonged to a safety deposit box, small, silver, unremarkable. I turned it over in my palm, wondering what secrets it might unlock. I slipped it into my pocket just as my phone chimed with a text notification. Landed safely. Meetings all day. Don't wait up tonight. No, I love you. No, miss you already. Just logistics, as if I were his personal assistant rather than his wife. I thumbed a reply. Good luck with your meetings. The baker says you and Olivia enjoyed your croissants last night. I watched the 3 dots appear, disappear, and appear again. Finally, had a quick strategy session for today's presentation. Meant to mention it. Talk later. The casual dismissal ignited something in me, a spark of indignation that had been smothered for too long under gratitude and self-sacrifice. I called Jess, my friend from the restaurant back home. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. Rachel, is the California sun turning you into a proper beach bum yet? I laughed, the sound brittle even to my own ears. Hardly. Listen, Jess, I need to ask you something. Shoot. When you met Daniel at that industry dinner last month when you were visiting, did he seem different to you? A pause, just a beat too long. Different how? Just different. From how you remembered him? Jess sighed. Rachel, what's really going on? I think. The words stuck in my throat. Saying them aloud would make them real. I think Daniel might be having an affair. Another silence, this one heavier. Oh, honey, what happened? I told her about the bakery, the credit card charge, the cryptic text exchange. With each word, the suspicion crystallized into something more substantial, more undeniable. Do you want me to fly out there? Jess asked when I finished. I can be on a plane tonight. No, I said, straightening my shoulders. No, I need to handle this myself. After we hung up, I sat on our perfectly styled sofa, surrounded by expensive art we'd never chosen, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront Daniel yet. I needed more information, more certainty. I used the next 3 days of his absence to conduct a quiet investigation. I called the bank where we had our joint accounts and requested statements going back 6 months. I checked his email on our shared laptop, finding it locked with a password I didn't know, another first in our relationship. I even drove by the company headquarters one evening, scanning the parking lot for his car, feeling like a character in a bad detective novel. Nothing definitive emerged, just a pattern of late nights, unexplained expenses, and a growing emotional distance that could no longer be attributed solely to his demanding career. When Daniel returned from Seattle, tanned despite the city's notorious rainfall, I watched him carefully. He brought me a gift, a delicate silver bracelet from a boutique near his hotel, and for a moment, as he fastened it around my wrist, I glimpsed the old Daniel in his gentle touch, his hopeful smile. "I've missed you," he said, and for the first time in months, his eyes met mine without immediately darting away to check his phone. I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to. That night, he made love to me with an intensity that left me breathless, clinging to him as if we could fuse our separate selves back into the unit we'd once been. Afterward, as he slept beside me, I fought the urge to wake him, to demand answers about Olivia, about the distance between us, about the key I'd found. Instead, I slipped out of bed and returned to his desk. The unmarked key burned in my palm as I tried various locks around the house, filing cabinets, the small safe in the closet, even the decorative boxes on the bookshelves. None fit. I was about to give up when my gaze fell on the sleek silver briefcase Daniel always kept in his home office. I'd never paid it much attention. Just another accessory of his business persona. On a hunch, I tried the key. The lock clicked. Open inside, I found a stack of legal documents, their formal language swimming before my eyes in the dim light. As I sifted through them, certain phrases jumped out. Dissolution of marriage, division of assets, privileged and confidential, divorce papers, drafted but not yet filed. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped them. According to the date, stamp, Daniel had consulted with attorneys 2 months ago, right around the time his company's valuation had hit 9 figures. The documents outlined a proposed settlement, a one-time payment of $250,000 to me in exchange for waiving any claim to his company shares, future earnings, or our California home, $250,000. After 6 years of marriage, after working 2 jobs to put him through school, after uprooting my entire life to support his dreams, it was generous by some standards, insulting by others, and utterly devastating either way. Stapled to the back was a non-disclosure agreement, preventing me from discussing our marriage, his company, or the terms of our separation with anyone, ever. The penalty for violation was the forfeiture of the entire settlement. I sat on the floor of his office, surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal, as the first light of dawn crept through the windows. I should have been crying, screaming, breaking things. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me. This was really happening. The man who had once told me I was his whole world had reduced our life together to a business transaction, a liability to be managed, a chapter to be closed neatly and quietly as he moved on to greater things. I carefully returned the papers to the briefcase, locked it, and placed the key exactly where I'd found it. Then I went to the kitchen and made coffee, my movements mechanical as my mind raced ahead. I had options. I could confront him immediately, demand an explanation for the papers, for Olivia, for all of it. I could call a lawyer, fight for my fair share of what we'd built together. I could even try to save our marriage, beg him to remember what we meant to each other before the money, and success transformed him. None of those options felt right. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't let Daniel dictate the terms of my life one more time. I was still sitting at the kitchen island, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee, when Daniel emerged, hair tousled, wearing only boxers. "You're up early," he yawned, reaching for a mug. "Bad night?" I studied him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. Had he ever really loved me? Or had I just been a convenient support system, a stepping stone on his path to greatness? "I'm thinking of visiting my sister," Next week, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She's been asking to see me since the baby was born. Daniel nodded absently, already scrolling through his phone. Sounds good. I'll be in New York anyway for the investment conference. Of course he would. I might stay for a couple of weeks, if that's okay. Help her with the baby. He glanced up briefly. Whatever you need, Rachel. You know I support your interests. The condescension in his tone made something twist inside me. My education, my family, my entire existence outside of his orbit had become interests, hobbies to be indulged when convenient, set aside when not. Great, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. I'll book my flight today. Daniel dropped. A distracted kiss on my head as he headed for the shower. Use the Amex. Might as well get the points. 2 days later, I boarded a plane to Chicago, where my sister Emily lived with her husband and new baby. Daniel drove me to the airport, filling the car with chatter about his upcoming conference, the new funding round, the expansion plans. Not once did he ask how I was feeling, what I was looking forward to, whether I was excited to meet my new niece. At the departures curb, he helped unload my suitcase. Have a good trip. Text when you land. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to reconcile this polished, distant man with the boy I'd fallen in love with, the one who had once promised we'd build a beautiful life together. Daniel? I said before I could stop myself. Are you happy with our life, with us? He seemed startled by the question, blinking rapidly before composing his features into a reassuring smile. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? We have everything we ever wanted. We? As if we still shared the same dreams, the same reality. Right, I said softly. Everything we wanted. I kissed him goodbye, breathing in his expensive cologne, memorizing the feel of his arms around me one last time. Then I turned and walked into the terminal without looking back. On the plane, as California disappeared beneath the clouds, I pulled out my phone and opened the secure email account I'd created yesterday. I'd spent hours scanning every page of the divorce documents I'd found, uploading them along with bank statements, property records, and company filings I'd gathered during my investigation. I sent copies to myself, to my sister, and to a reputable family law attorney whose card I'd picked up at a networking event months ago, back when I was still trying to build a life in San Francisco, still believing I had a place in Daniel's world. The documents showed that Daniel's company was about to be acquired by a tech giant for billions. His personal stake would be worth over $300 million. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for next month, conveniently after our divorce would be finalized if he had his way. He'd tried to hide this from me, to cut me out before the biggest payday of his life. The payday that my years of sacrifice had helped make possible. But he'd underestimated me, the woman who had once worked 18-hour days to support his dreams, the woman who had given up everything to help him succeed, the woman who was now finally putting herself first. As the plane reached cruising altitude, I closed my eyes, the weight of the past year, of the past 6 years, lifting slightly from my shoulders. I didn't know exactly what came next. I only knew that Daniel Whitman was about to learn a painful lesson. I was not a footnote in his success story. I was not a problem to be solved with legal documents and hush money. I was the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. And now I was the woman who held the power to bring his carefully constructed new life crashing down around him. For the first time in years, I felt something like hope unfurling in my chest, not for reconciliation, but for justice, for reclaiming what was rightfully mine, for becoming the author of my own story again. The seatbelt sign dinged off. The flight attendant announced we were free to move about the cabin, and I was finally, truly free. Chicago greeted me with a biting wind that cut through my California clothes like they were made of tissue paper. Emily met me at baggage claim, her baby daughter Lily strapped to her chest in a complicated-looking carrier. Rachel! She engulfed me in a one-armed hug, Lily squished between us. God, look at you! You've lost weight. Are you eating? I forced a smile, hefting my suitcase off the carousel. California lifestyle. Everyone's obsessed with kale. And Pilates. Emily narrowed her eyes, seeing through my deflection the way only a sister can. Uh-huh. And does this lifestyle also involve your husband being a giant ass? Because that's the vibe I'm getting. In the car, as we inched through Chicago traffic toward her Wicker Park brownstone, I finally told her everything. The emotional distance, the suspicious meetings with Olivia, the divorce papers, the imminent acquisition. The words poured out of me, unstoppable once they began, like a dam breaking after years of mounting pressure. Emily listened in silence, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When I finished, she let out a long, slow breath. That manipulative, ungrateful bastard. I laughed despite myself, a hollow sound that threatened to dissolve into sobs. That about sums it up. Have you called the lawyer yet? The one you sent the documents to? I shook my head. I wanted to wait until I got here, make sure I had some emotional support. Emily reached across the console to squeeze my hand. Well, you've got it. In spades. Now call the damn lawyer. Jessica Mendoza's law office occupied the top floor of a renovated factory building in downtown Chicago. Her assistant led us into a conference room with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Emily had insisted on coming with me, arranging for her husband to watch Lily for the afternoon. I've reviewed the documents you sent, Jessica said without preamble as she entered the room. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s perhaps, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that instantly put me at ease. And I have to say, Mrs. Whitman, your husband's attempt to hide assets before a divorce filing is one of the more egregious examples I've seen in my career. Call me Rachel, please, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. And thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Jessica nodded, spreading the papers I'd sent her across the table. Let's cut to the chase. Based on what I'm seeing here, your husband is attempting to defraud you out of a significant marital asset, namely, his share of this company that's about to be acquired for billions. So what can I do? Well, that depends on what you want. Jessica leaned back in her chair, studying me. You have several options. We could file for divorce immediately, demanding full financial disclosure and an equitable division of assets, including his company shares. Given the timing and the evidence of his intent to hide the acquisition, a judge would likely look very favorably on your position. I nodded, trying to absorb this. And my other options? A hint of a smile touched Jessica's lips. That's where things get more interesting. Technically, you're still his wife. You've supported him throughout his education and the founding of this company. You've maintained the household, relocated for his career, put your own aspirations on hold. In community property states like California, half of everything acquired during the marriage belongs to you, including his company shares. Emily leaned forward. So she's entitled to half of whatever he gets from this acquisition? Potentially, yes, which, based on these documents, would be in the neighborhood of $150 million. The number hung in the air between us, impossible and absurd. More, money than I could comprehend. He'll fight it, I said softly. He'll say I didn't contribute anything to the company's success. Jessica's expression hardened. Let him try. Courts have repeatedly recognized the value of spousal support during the creation of a business. You worked 2 jobs to put him through graduate school. You moved across the country for his career. That's textbook contribution, Rachel. I stared down at the polished surface of the conference table, seeing my distorted reflection. Who was this woman, contemplating lawsuits and millions of dollars? How had I gone from serving coffee to suddenly fighting for a fortune? What if? I hesitated, The idea half formed in my mind. What if I don't want to file for divorce yet? Jessica raised an eyebrow. You want to attempt reconciliation? God, no. The vehemence in my voice surprised even me. I want him to experience what I'm experiencing right now. This sense of betrayal, of having everything you believed in pulled out from under you. Emily exchanged a glance with Jessica. Rachel, what exactly are you thinking? I straightened my shoulders. I'm thinking that Daniel believes I'm going to be out of the picture before this acquisition is announced, that I'll take his insulting settlement and disappear quietly. What if I don't? What if I'm right there beside him when the announcement happens? What if I make sure everyone knows exactly who helped him get where he is today? A slow smile spread across Jessica's face. Now that could be very interesting indeed. Over the next 3 hours, we crafted a plan that was part legal strategy, part psychological warfare. Jessica would file paperwork putting a freeze on Daniel's assets. Not a full divorce filing yet, just enough legal maneuvering to ensure he couldn't liquidate or transfer anything significant without my knowledge. Meanwhile, I would return to California as if nothing had changed, playing the part of the supportive wife for a few more weeks. You're sure about this? Emily asked as we left the lawyer's office. You could just take him to court, get your settlement, and be done with him. I shook my head, watching the city lights begin to flicker on as dusk settled over Chicago. He doesn't just get to discard me, Emily. Not after everything I've given up for him. He needs to understand what he's throwing away. Back at Emily's brownstone, as we sat at her kitchen table drinking wine after Lily had finally fallen asleep, my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. How's your sister? Acquisition timeline moving up. Needs to happen next week. Can you cut your trip short? Need you here for some events? I showed the message to Emily, who snorted. Wow, no, I miss you, or how are you? Just, I need my trophy wife prop. Hop on a plane. He doesn't even realize, I said, staring at the text. He genuinely doesn't see anything wrong with how he's treating me. Men like that never do, Emily replied, refilling my glass. They think the world revolves around them because for too long, we've let it. I typed a reply, carefully crafting my tone to match what Daniel would expect. Helpful, accommodating, oblivious. Of course. Emily understands. I can fly back tomorrow. So exciting about the acquisition moving up. Perfect, Emily said, reading over my shoulder. Keep him thinking everything's normal until the moment you pull the rug out from under him. The next day, as I prepared to return to San Francisco, Emily pulled me into a fierce hug at the departure gate. Remember, you deserve every penny of what you're fighting for, she whispered. Don't let him make you doubt that for a second. I nodded against her shoulder, drawing strength from her unwavering support. I won't. I promise. On the flight back, I reviewed the documents Jessica had prepared, committing key details to memory. According to our plan, I would maintain the facade of normalcy until the acquisition announcement. Jessica would use that time to quietly gather additional evidence of Daniel's attempted fraud and to prepare the legal bombshell we would drop at precisely the right moment. Daniel met me at San Francisco International, looking distracted, but making an effort at affection with a quick kiss on the cheek. How was your sister? He asked as we walked to the parking garage, his attention divided between me and his phone. Good. The baby's beautiful. I studied his profile, searching for any trace of the man I'd fallen in love with. So, the acquisition's happening next week? That's amazing, Daniel. He glanced up, a genuine smile breaking through his distraction. It's huge. Beyond anything I could have imagined when we started this company, the board is ecstatic. I'm so proud of you, I said. And the strange thing was, a part of me meant it. Despite everything, I couldn't help admiring what he'd built. What we'd built, though he'd forgotten that part. During the drive home, Daniel filled me in on the details. The tech giant acquiring his company had accelerated the timeline due to a competitor showing interest. The announcement would happen at a gala event next Friday night, with press, investors, and industry leaders in attendance. They want to make a big splash, he explained, animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. Show the world that they're serious about integrating this technology. It's going to be black tie, red carpet, the works. Sounds like I need a new dress, I said lightly. Daniel looked over at me, seeming truly focused on me for the first time. In ages. Get whatever you want. Price is no object. After next week will be... well, things will be different. I smiled, hiding the cold anger those words triggered. Different. Yes, I imagine they will be. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, I checked his email on our shared laptop. The password had been changed again, but I'd anticipated this. During my last days before Chicago, I'd installed a keystroke logger on the computer. Morally dubious, perhaps, but nothing compared to the betrayal he was planning. His inbox confirmed what I already knew. The acquisition was moving forward at breakneck speed, with Daniel set to receive approximately $320 million in cash and stock. Options. There were also multiple emails between him and Olivia Chen that went far beyond professional boundaries. Intimate jokes, late-night messages, plans for a celebration trip to Bali after the acquisition. So it wasn't just business between them. The confirmation should have hurt, but I felt only a dull recognition, as if discovering something I'd known all along. I forwarded the relevant emails to my secure account, then carefully covered my digital tracks. Jessica had emphasized the importance of documenting everything without alerting Daniel that I was onto him. The element of surprise is our greatest advantage, she'd said. The moment he realizes you know, he'll start hiding assets even more, aggressively. The next few days passed in a strange parallel reality. On the surface, I played the role of the excited, supportive wife, helping Daniel select his tuxedo for the gala, arranging for a car service, even fielding calls from event planners seeking his preferences for the celebration. Beneath this performance, I was meticulously building my case with Jessica's guidance, documenting every asset, every communication, every piece of evidence that would soon become ammunition. I also went shopping for a gala dress, as promised. Not at the boutiques Daniel might have expected, but at a small designer studio Emily had connected me with, a former college friend who now created custom pieces for Chicago's elite. I need something unforgettable, I told the designer during our video consultation. Something that makes a statement. 3 days before the gala, a discreet package arrived at our house. The dress inside was unlike anything I'd ever worn. Bold, sophisticated, commanding attention without being ostentatious. It was the dress of a woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to claim it. I hid it in the back of my closet, behind the California casual clothes Daniel had encouraged me to buy when we moved, clothes that helped me blend into the background of his success story. The night before the gala, Daniel didn't come home until well past midnight. I pretended to be asleep when he slipped into bed, smelling of expensive scotch and Olivia's distinctive perfume. As he fell into an oblivious slumber beside me, I stared at the ceiling, rehearsing my lines for tomorrow's performance. The last time I would ever play the role of the grateful, invisible wife. My phone vibrated softly on the nightstand, a text from Jessica. Everything in place, documents filed, ready when you are. I typed back a single word. Ready. Morning arrived with a crystalline clarity to the air, as if the fog that typically shrouded our hillside home had decided to grant me this one perfect day. Daniel was already gone when I woke. Final preparations for the gala, his hastily scrawled note explained. I moved through the house with a strange sense of detachment, touching objects, taking mental inventory. This sofa where we'd rarely sat, together. These art pieces selected by a decorator I'd never met. This kitchen where I'd tried and failed to create a sense of home. None of it had ever really been mine. Tonight, I would reclaim what actually was. At noon, the doorbell rang. A courier with a package from Jessica, final documents I might need, along with a handwritten note. Remember, timing is everything. Wait for the announcement. Make sure there are witnesses. I spent the afternoon preparing with the focused attention of an actress before opening night. Hair, makeup, each element carefully calculated. When I finally slipped into the dress, I hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. Poised, powerful, dangerous in her certainty. At 6:30, the car service arrived. Daniel had texted that he would meet me at the venue, some last-minute crisis requiring his attention. Of course, the gala was being held at the Legion of Honor, the art museum's neoclassical columns illuminated against the darkening sky. Red. Carpet, photographers, exactly as Daniel had described. A celebration of wealth and success, carefully choreographed for maximum impact. I gave my name to the attendant at the entrance. His eyes widened slightly as he checked his list. Mrs. Whitman. Of course. Your husband is already inside. If you'll follow me. The grand hall had been transformed into a glittering reception space, with champagne flowing and San Francisco's tech elite clustered in animated conversation. I spotted Daniel immediately, the center of attention in a group that included the CEO of the acquiring company and several venture capitalists who had backed his startup. Olivia Chen stood beside him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, her red dress a calculated contrast to his black tuxedo. They looked like a power couple from the pages of a glossy magazine, perfectly matched in ambition and style. Daniel glanced up, saw me approaching, and for a split second, naked panic flashed across his face. Not because I'd discovered his affair, he clearly thought I remained oblivious to that, but because I looked different, confident, uncontrolled. "Rachel," he said, quickly recovering, "you look... wow, come meet everyone." I smiled, accepting the champagne flute a waiter offered as I joined the circle. "Sorry I'm late. Some things just can't be rushed." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. I played my part flawlessly, the charming wife, appropriately impressed by the power players surrounding us, just intelligent enough to follow the conversation without threatening anyone's ego. Olivia watched me, with thinly veiled hostility, clearly unsettled by my unexpected poise. Daniel kept shooting me nervous glances, as if trying to reconcile this version of his wife with the compliant woman he'd grown accustomed to dismissing. At 8:30 sharp, a chime rang through the hall. The CEO of the acquiring company took the podium, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion." Daniel squeezed my hand, leaning close to whisper, "This is it. Everything we've worked for." I looked into his eyes. Those same eyes that had once gazed at me with genuine love across a coffee shop counter, and saw nothing but ambition and self-satisfaction. "Yes," I replied softly. "Everything we've worked for." The CEO continued his speech, praising Daniel's innovation, the synergy between the companies, the bright future ahead. Daniel was called to the podium to thunderous applause, Olivia beaming from the front row. As he began his acceptance speech, thanking investors and mentors and colleagues, I slipped my phone from my clutch and sent a single text to Jessica. "Now." Daniel's voice rang through the hall. "And none of this would have been possible without the support of my incredible wife, Rachel." A spotlight swung toward me, catching me in its glare as the assembled crowd applauded politely. I raised my glass in acknowledgement, a smile fixed on my face, waiting for the exact moment when my world, and Daniel's, would change forever. The applause faded as Daniel continued his speech, his voice carrying across the grand hall with practiced confidence. As we embark on this next chapter, I want to thank everyone who believed in our vision from the beginning. This acquisition represents not just a business transaction, but a validation of the risks we took, the nights we worked, the sacrifices, We made. My phone vibrated in my hand. A text from Jessica. Papers served to company legal team. Injunction in place. Press release going out in 3, 2, 1. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, took a steadying breath, and watched as several executives in the front row glanced down at their devices simultaneously. Confusion flashed across their faces, followed by concern, then something approaching alarm as they turned to whisper urgently to their colleagues. The CEO of the acquiring company frowned at his buzzing phone, then leaned over to murmur something to his chief counsel, who immediately stood and made his way toward the side door, already dialing his phone. Daniel, oblivious to the ripple of disruption sweeping through the audience, was describing his plans for integration and expansion. Which means we'll be able to scale our technology across multiple markets by the third quarter, with projected revenue increases of... A man in an impeccable suit, whom I recognized as the acquiring company's CFO, approached the stage and discreetly signaled to Daniel, who paused mid-sentence. "Just one moment, please," Daniel said with a practiced smile, covering his microphone as he bent to listen to whatever urgent message was being delivered. I watched as the color drained from his face, his eyes widening in disbelief. He straightened, visibly struggling to maintain his composure, and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but it seems we need a brief intermission. Please, enjoy the refreshments, and we'll resume shortly." The murmurs throughout. The crowd grew louder as Daniel was escorted off the stage by a cluster of executives, all speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Olivia tried to follow them, but was politely but firmly redirected by security. I turned to the crowd that had gathered around us, no longer caring that this private pain had become public spectacle. In fact, I welcomed the witnesses. Do you know what it's like to realize the person you built your life around sees you as nothing more than a liability to be managed? To discover that after years of sacrifice, you've been reduced to a number on a spreadsheet? To find divorce papers hidden in a briefcase while you're still picking out anniversary gifts? Daniel stepped toward me, his voice low and dangerous. "Stop this. Now." "No," I said simply. "I won't stop. Not anymore." I reached into my clutch and pulled out a folded document, a copy of the divorce papers I'd found in his briefcase, complete with the insulting settlement offer and the NDA that would have silenced me forever. "Your husband didn't just plan to divorce me," I announced, holding up the papers. "He planned to erase me, to reduce 6 years of marriage, of partnership, of building something together, to a one-time payment and a gag order, while he walks away with hundreds of millions of dollars that I helped him earn." The CEO's expression had changed from discomfort to something approaching disgust as he looked at Daniel. Several of the investors who had been singing his praises earlier were now watching with cold calculation, reassessing the man they'd trusted with their millions. Daniel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "This is all a misunderstanding," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. "Rachel has been under a lot of stress lately, moving to a new city, trying to adjust to a different lifestyle." "Stop," I interrupted, my patience finally exhausted. "Stop lying. To them, to yourself, to me. It's over, Daniel. The acquisition is halted pending court review. Your attempt to hide assets has been documented and submitted to the judge. Your future with this company, with any company, is now in question because everyone in this room knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear the next part. "You thought I was too naive to protect myself, too devoted to question you, too dependent to stand up for what's mine. That was your mistake." His face had gone pale, the full implications of what I'd done finally sinking in. The acquisition that would have made him a billionaire was now in jeopardy. His professional reputation was crumbling before his eyes. The carefully constructed image he'd built of the brilliant, ethical tech founder was being replaced in real time with something far less flattering. "You've ruined everything," he whispered, a desperate edge to his voice. "Years of work destroyed. In minutes." "No, Daniel," I replied, feeling a surprising flicker of pity beneath my determination. "You did that yourself. I'm just making sure I don't get buried in the wreckage." I turned away from him then, conscious of the stares, the whispers, the phones discreetly recording every moment of his downfall. As I walked toward the exit, head high, I heard Olivia's sharp voice behind me. "Daniel, is it true? Was this all planned to cut her out before the money came in?" I didn't stay to hear his answer. Outside, the cool San Francisco night air filled my lungs, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I could breathe fully. A text from Jessica lit up my phone. "You've got them on the ropes. Their lawyers are already reaching out for settlement talks." I smiled to myself as I slid into the waiting car. "No rush," I texted back. "I think they need some time to process what just happened." Back at the house, our house at least for now, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of the ridiculously expensive wine Daniel had been saving for a special occasion. As I sipped it, I wandered through the rooms that had never felt like home, seeing them with new eyes. None of this mattered, I realized. Not the modernist furniture or the infinity pool or the sweeping views of the bay. What mattered was reclaiming my dignity, my agency, my future. My phone buzzed continuously. Texts from Emily asking for updates, emails from Jessica with legal developments, even a few messages from mutual friends who had witnessed the scene. At the gala. I ignored them all, savoring this moment of perfect solitude, of coming back to myself after being lost for so long. Around midnight, I heard the front door open. Heavy footsteps in the hallway, the sound of keys tossed onto the entry table. Daniel appeared in the doorway of the living room, his bow tie undone, his expression a mixture of exhaustion and defeat. "The acquisition is dead," he said flatly. "Tech giant pulled out completely. The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow to discuss my future with the company." I nodded, unsurprised. "And Olivia?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "Gone. Apparently she's not interested in damaged goods." "How convenient," I remarked, taking another sip of wine. "For both of you." He crossed to the bar and poured himself a generous measure of scotch, downing half of it in one swallow. "You know, you've destroyed more than just me tonight. Hundreds. Of employees, shareholders. Their futures were tied to this acquisition too." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't try to make me responsible for your choices, Daniel. If you had been honest, if you had been fair, none of this would have happened. There could have been an amicable divorce, a reasonable settlement that reflected my contributions to your success. You chose this path, not me." He slumped onto the sofa across from me, suddenly looking every bit the defeated man he was. "What do you want, Rachel? What's your endgame here?" "What I've always wanted," I replied simply. "Recognition for what I've given. Respect for what I'm owed. A chance to build my own future instead of just enabling yours." "And if I agree to your terms? Split everything 50-50, no contest?" I considered him carefully. "It's not about the money, Daniel. Not really. It's about acknowledging that I wasn't just a convenience or a stepping stone. I was your partner, in every sense that matters." For a moment, something like understanding flickered in his eyes. A glimpse of the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who had once recognized my value. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by cold calculation. "My lawyers will contact yours tomorrow," he said, finishing his scotch. "I assume you won't be staying here tonight." "Actually, I will," I replied calmly. "This is still my home, legally speaking. I believe there's a perfectly good guest room you can use." The look of shock on his face was almost comical, as if the concept of him accommodating me rather than the other way around was fundamentally inconceivable. Without another word, he stood and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, toward what had once been our bedroom. I remained in the living room, watching the city lights flicker across the bay, feeling strangely peaceful despite the seismic changes of the past few hours. Tomorrow would bring negotiations, settlements, the practical dismantling of a marriage that had already died long ago. But tonight, I had reclaimed something infinitely more valuable than money or property. I had reclaimed myself. 2 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new apartment in downtown Chicago, directing movers where to place the few pieces of furniture I'd kept from my life with Daniel. The settlement had been finalized with surprising speed once he understood the alternative: a public trial that would further damage his reputation and possibly result in fraud charges. In the end, I received exactly half of his company shares, which the board eventually agreed to buy back at a slightly reduced valuation. My settlement came to just over $140 million, a sum so vast I still couldn't fully comprehend it. Daniel had been forced to step down as CEO, though he remained on the board in a diminished capacity. Last I heard, he and Olivia had reconciled, and were planning a fresh start in New York, where he was attempting to rebuild his reputation in a different tech scene. I didn't wish him ill. The anger that had propelled me through those final confrontations had dissipated, leaving behind a kind of detached wisdom. We had both made choices, his selfish and short-sighted, mine perhaps too self-sacrificing for too long. The lessons had been painful but necessary. Emily appeared in the doorway, Lily balanced on her hip. "The movers want to know where to put your desk." "In the second bedroom," I replied. "The one I'm setting up as a study." She nodded, then lingered, studying me with sisterly concern. "You okay? You seem quiet today." I smiled, watching as another box labeled books was carried past. "I'm good, just thinking about what comes next." "And what does come next for Rachel?" "Whitman, newly minted millionaire?" Emily teased. "First, it's Rachel Turner again," I corrected her, having reclaimed my maiden name along with my independence. "And second, I think what comes next is exactly what I've been putting off for far too long." The next week, I submitted my application to Northwestern University's literature program, not as the part-time student I'd once envisioned being, but as someone fully committed to finally pursuing her own dreams. I also established a scholarship fund for working adults returning to education after supporting partners or raising children. People whose own ambitions had been deferred by love or duty or necessity. The first recipients would start classes alongside me in the fall. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still thought about that coffee shop where Daniel and I first met, about the young woman who had written her number on a cup, full of hope and possibility, believing in the promise of building something beautiful together. She hadn't been wrong to believe. Her mistake had been in forgetting to keep some of that belief for herself, to nurture her own potential alongside his. It was a mistake I would never make again. As spring bloomed across Chicago, bringing with it the promise of renewal, I enrolled in a creative writing workshop, joined a local book club, reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I was building a life that was authentically mine, brick by careful brick. Some days were harder than others. Some nights I woke up reaching for someone who was no longer there, missing not the man Daniel had become, but the partnership we'd once shared. Healing wasn't linear, and freedom, I was learning, came with its own particular loneliness. But each morning, I woke to possibilities that were mine alone to explore. Each decision I made was guided by my own desires, my own priorities, my own vision for the future. After years of orienting my life around someone else's needs, the simple act of choosing for myself felt revolutionary. The money helped, of course. Financial security created options that had never been available to me before. But the true wealth I'd gained wasn't measured in dollars. It was the reclamation of my time, my energy, my potential. all the parts of myself I'd surrendered in service to someone else's dreams. On a bright Tuesday afternoon in May, I sat on the patio of a small cafe near my new apartment, working on an essay for my creative writing class. The professor had assigned us to write about a personal transformation, and my fingers flew across the keyboard as I shaped my experience into narrative. A barista approached with a fresh cup of coffee I hadn't ordered. "From the gentleman at the counter," she explained with a smile. "He said to tell you he hopes your story has a happy ending." I glanced up to see a man about my age, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, raising his own cup in a small salute before turning to leave. "Wait," I called after him. "Don't you want to stay and find out?" He hesitated, then smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I wouldn't want to impose on your writing time." "I think I've reached a good stopping point," I replied, closing my laptop. "Besides, the ending is still being written." He crossed to my table and extended his hand. "I'm Michael." "Rachel," I said, shaking it firmly. "Nice to meet you, Michael." "So, what's your story about?" he asked, sliding into the chair across from me. I considered the question, looking past him to the city skyline, the open sky, the boundless horizon. "It's about waking up," I said finally. "About remembering who you are after forgetting for too long. About building something new from the ruins of what you thought you wanted." "Sounds like a story worth telling," he said, his eyes curious but undemanding. "I'd like to hear more, if you're willing to share it." I smiled, feeling something unfamiliar and yet instantly recognizable unfurling in my chest. Not the desperate need that had defined my relationship with Daniel, but something lighter, something with room to breathe and grow. "I think I might be," I said. "But first, I'd like to hear yours." As the afternoon sun warmed my shoulders and the city hummed with life around us, I felt it again. That sense of possibility, of paths not yet taken, of stories not yet told. This time, though, I wasn't pinning that possibility on someone else's future or subordinating my dreams to theirs. This time, whatever came next would be on my terms, and that, I was discovering, made all the difference. My conversation with Michael at the cafe stretched from afternoon into evening, the easy rhythm of our exchange making time feel irrelevant. Unlike my early interactions with Daniel, where I'd felt a constant need to impress, to prove my worth, this felt different, balanced. "So you're really starting over," he said as we shared a plate of appetizers, having moved from coffee to wine as dusk settled over Chicago. "Most people talk about it, but you're actually doing it." I smiled, swirling the Cabernet in my glass. I had a rather forceful push in that direction. "Still," he insisted, "it takes courage to rebuild, especially after investing so many years in someone else's vision." There was something refreshing about his perspective. No hint of judgment or pity, just genuine admiration for the choices I was making now. "What about you?" I asked, deflecting attention from myself. "What's your story, Michael?" He leaned back, considering. "Less dramatic than yours, I'm afraid. English professor at Northwestern, divorced 4 years ago, no children. I write short stories that almost get published and I make a mean risotto. That's the highlight reel." "You teach at Northwestern?" The coincidence made me laugh. "I just enrolled in their literature program, starting this fall." His eyebrows rose. "Really? Well, I'm in the American literature department, so our paths might cross professionally." "Is that a problem?" I asked, suddenly conscious of potential complications. He shook his head. "Not unless you take one of my classes. Even then, we could disclose whatever this is." He gestured between us with a self-deprecating smile. "And what is this exactly?" I surprised myself with the directness of the question. Michael considered me thoughtfully. "I think it's two people enjoying a conversation, with the possibility of more conversations in the future. No pressure, no expectations, just potential. Potential. The word resonated in a way I hadn't anticipated. After the collapse of my marriage and the intensity of the legal battle, I'd assumed I would need years before even considering another relationship. Yet here I was, 3 months later, feeling something unfamiliar stirring, not desperate passion or needy attachment, but simple, genuine interest in another human being. I like potential, I said finally. It's a good place to start. We exchanged numbers as we parted ways, with loose plans to meet again the following week. I walked home through the pleasant Chicago evening, feeling lighter than I had in years. Next morning, reality reasserted itself in the form of an email from Jessica, my attorney. Call me when you get a chance. Daniel's people have made a new request. I sighed, my good mood evaporating. Despite the finalized settlement, Daniel had been finding excuses to maintain contact, questions about tax documentation, disputes over personal items I'd left behind, requests to sign additional paperwork. Jessica assured me it was normal post-divorce. Maneuvering. But each interaction pulled me back into a past I was trying to leave behind. What is it this time? I asked when I called her, not bothering to hide my irritation. He wants a meeting. In person. Says there are aspects of the intellectual property rights that need clarification, and he wants to discuss them face-to-face rather than through lawyers. I frowned, immediately suspicious. That makes no sense. The IP rights were clearly outlined in the settlement. What's his real agenda? Hard to say, Jessica replied. His attorney claims Daniel feels there were misunderstandings that led to the confrontation at the gala, and he wants to clear the air. Clear the air, I repeated flatly, after he tried to defraud me out of millions and run off with his VP. You don't have to meet with him, Jessica assured me. In fact, I'd advise against it. Everything can be handled through proper legal channels. I stared out my apartment window at the Chicago skyline, considering. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to maintain the clean break I'd been working toward. But another part, the part that had spent years with this man, was curious. What possible explanation could he offer for his betrayal? If I did agree, I said slowly, it would be on my terms. Neutral location you present. Limited time frame. Rachel. Jessica's voice carried a note of warning. He doesn't deserve any more of your time or energy. I know. I sighed. But maybe I need this. One final conversation to truly close this chapter. Otherwise, I might always wonder what he wanted to say. Jessica remained silent for a moment. All right, I'll arrange it, but with every protection in place. And you can walk out the moment it feels wrong. 2 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at Jessica's Chicago office, watching Daniel through the glass wall as he spoke with his attorney in the reception area. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that even his expensive suit couldn't disguise. The golden glow of success that had surrounded him in California had dimmed considerably. When he entered the room, his confident stride faltered slightly upon seeing me. I wondered what he saw, the same woman he'd dismissed so easily, or someone transformed. Rachel, he said, his voice softer than I remembered. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak yet. Jessica sat beside me, her posture radiating professional skepticism. As I explained to your counsel, Daniel's attorney began, my client wishes to discuss certain intellectual property considerations that may affect both parties going forward. Let's skip the pretense, I said, finding my voice. What do you really want, Daniel? Daniel glanced at his lawyer, then seemed to make a decision. Could we have the room? Just for a few minutes? His attorney looked alarmed. Mr. Whitman, I strongly advise against— It's fine, Daniel interrupted. This isn't about legal strategy, it's personal. Jessica turned to me, eyebrows raised in silent question. I nodded. It's okay. I'll be fine. The lawyers exchanged glances, neither happy with the situation, but they gathered their materials and stepped outside, Jessica squeezing my shoulder supportively as she passed. When the door closed, silence stretched between us. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. You look good, he said finally. Chicago agrees with you. Daniel, I said firmly. I didn't come here for small talk. Say what you need to say. He nodded, swallowing hard. I owe you an apology. A real one, not the kind negotiated by lawyers or crafted for public consumption. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. I'm listening. What I did was unforgivable, he continued, meeting my gaze directly for the first time. Not just the divorce papers or Olivia, but the way I treated you for years before that. Gradually erasing your contributions, taking your support for granted, making decisions that affected both our lives without consulting you. I became someone I never thought I'd be, someone my younger self would have despised. The rawness in his voice caught me off guard. This wasn't the polished, calculated Daniel of recent years. Why? I asked simply. When did I stop being your partner and start being an obstacle? He flinched at the word obstacle. It wasn't a single moment, he said slowly. It was a gradual shift. The more successful the company became, the more I started believing my own mythology, that I was special, exceptional, deserving of everything I wanted. And the people around me reinforced that narrative. Investors, mentors, the press, they all treated me like some kind of visionary genius. And Olivia? I couldn't help asking, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Olivia represented the world I thought I wanted. Ambitious, sophisticated, connected. She understood the tech industry in ways you never pretended to. Being with her felt like further confirmation of my new status. He paused, looking down. It was shallow and pathetic, and I'm not proud of it. Are you still together? I was surprised by how little I cared about the answer. No. A bitter smile crossed his face. Turns out her interest was primarily in the CEO of a hot startup on the verge of a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. When that disappeared, so did her enthusiasm. She took a position with a competitor last month. I nodded, unsurprised. Karma has a certain elegance to it. The company is struggling, he continued, rubbing his forehead tiredly. Without the acquisition, we're burning through capital, and investors are nervous. The board has essentially sidelined me. My title remains, but my authority is gone. They bring me out for press events occasionally, like some kind of tech industry mascot, but everyone knows it's just for show. Part of me, a small, vindictive part I wasn't proud of, felt a flash of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by something more complex. Not exactly pity, but a kind of detached compassion for someone whose life had unraveled largely through his own choices. I'm sorry your company is struggling, I said, meaning it. I never wanted to destroy what you built. I just wanted what was fairly mine. I know, he said quietly, and you deserved more than what I offered. Much more. He hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small flash drive. This is why I really wanted to see you. I eyed it suspiciously. What is it? Source code, he said, placing it on the table between us. For a project I've been developing privately, separate from the company. It's a natural language processing algorithm that helps identify and quantify emotional patterns in literature. It started as a side project years ago when you were talking about studying literature. I stared at the flash drive, confused. Why? Are you giving this to me? Because it's yours, he said simply. The concept came from those conversations we used to have about how you wanted to analyze classic texts, find the patterns that made them resonate emotionally with readers. I just built the technical framework around your insights. I remembered those conversations, late nights in our tiny apartment, me talking excitedly about literary theory while Daniel listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, making connections I hadn't considered. This has significant commercial potential, Daniel continued, especially in academic contexts. Northwestern has one of the best computational linguistics programs in the country. They might be interested in developing it further. I made no move to take the flash drive. Is this some kind of peace offering? Or another business proposition? Neither, he replied. It's recognition of your intellectual contribution to something I created, of the fact that even when I stopped acknowledging it, your influence on my work never really disappeared. He pushed the flash drive closer to me. You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed you to have it. The gesture touched something in me I thought had hardened beyond reach. Not because of the potential value of what he was offering, but because it represented perhaps the first truly selfless act from Daniel in years. An acknowledgement that couldn't benefit him, might even cost him, but that he felt compelled to make anyway. Thank you, I said finally, picking up the flash drive. I'll think about what to do with it. He nodded, visibly relieved. There's one more thing. He hesitated, then continued. I'm moving back east, Boston. A small startup focusing on educational technology. Not as CEO, just a regular developer, starting over in a way. That sounds right, I said carefully. A chance to reconnect with why you started coding in the first place. Exactly. His smile was tentative, almost shy, reminiscent of the Daniel I'd first met. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history settling between us like a physical presence. Not the jagged, painful thing it had been months ago, but something smoother, worn down by time and perspective. I should go, he said eventually, standing. My flight leaves in a few hours. I rose as well, extending my hand in a gesture that felt both formal and deeply significant. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope you find what you're looking for in Boston. He took my hand, holding it for just a moment longer than necessary. And I hope Northwestern recognizes how fortunate they are to have you. He released my hand and walked to the door, then paused, looking back. For what it's worth, Rachel, you deserved better, and I'll regret how I treated you for the rest of my life. After he left, Jessica returned, concern etched on her features. Everything okay? I nodded, still processing the unexpected turn the meeting had taken. Yes, I think that really was goodbye. That evening, I sat on my apartment balcony, the flash drive Daniel had given me resting on the table beside an untouched glass of wine. The Chicago sunset painted the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks, a fitting backdrop for the swirl of emotions I was experiencing. My phone chimed with a text from Michael. Still on for coffee tomorrow? I smiled, typing back. Absolutely, looking forward to it. As I set the phone down, I realized something significant had shifted within me during that final meeting with Daniel. The anger that had fueled me through the confrontation and legal battle had dissipated, leaving behind not emptiness, but space. Space for new possibilities, new connections, new versions of myself I hadn't yet discovered. I picked up the flash, drive, turning it over in my palm. Whatever it contained, genuine innovation or mere gesture, it represented something important. Recognition of my intellectual value, of my contribution to ideas that mattered. After years of being relegated to the background of Daniel's success story, this small acknowledgement felt surprisingly meaningful. The fall semester began with a burst of nervous energy as I stepped onto Northwestern's campus, feeling simultaneously too old and too young for this new chapter. My first literature seminar included students fresh from undergraduate programs, their faces still carrying the unlined confidence of youth, alongside a handful of older students returning to academia after other careers. The professor, not Michael, who taught in a different department, seemed pleased by the diverse mix, especially after I introduced myself and mentioned my unusual path to the program. Several younger students sought me out after class, curious about my real-world experience, seemingly eager for proof that life didn't follow predictable patterns. I found myself becoming something of a mentor to a small group of women in the II program, offering perspective not just on literature but on the messy business of building a life that aligned with one's values rather than external expectations. It was a role I'd never anticipated, but that fulfilled something deep within me. Michael and I continued meeting for coffee, then dinners, then weekend outings to museums and bookstores and jazz clubs. We moved slowly, both carrying the caution of past disappointments, but with a mutual respect that made each step feel secure rather than tentative. 3 months into the semester, I finally showed him the flash drive Daniel had given me, explaining its origins and potential. "This is fascinating," Michael said after I'd demonstrated the algorithm's capabilities on a digital copy of Pride and Prejudice, watching as it tracked emotional resonance across Austen's carefully constructed narrative. "Have you shown this to anyone in the comp sci department?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I've been learning more about natural language processing first, trying to understand what I actually have here. You should talk to Professor Winters in computational linguistics," he suggested. "This intersects perfectly with her research on digital humanities." The meeting with Professor Winters led to a collaboration that eventually expanded to include faculty from 3 departments, with me serving as an unexpected bridge between the humanities and computer science worlds. By spring, we'd secured a modest grant to further develop the algorithm into a research tool for literary analysis. Daniel's algorithm, which I'd renamed Emily, Emotional Mapping Interface for Literary Analysis, became the foundation for my graduate thesis, combining my love of literature with a newfound interest in digital humanities. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had once dismissed my educational aspirations as secondary had inadvertently provided the tool that was now opening new academic doors. 1 year after my confrontation with Daniel at the gala, I received an unexpected email from a tech journalist who had witnessed the scene. She was writing a feature on gender dynamics in the tech industry and wanted to interview me about my experience. My first instinct was to decline. I'd put that chapter behind me, focusing on building my new life, rather than relitigating the past. But after discussing it with both Jessica and Michael, I reconsidered. "Your story might help other women recognize similar patterns before they've given up years of their lives," Michael pointed out. "Not everyone gets the vindication you did." The resulting article, "The Invisible Partners: Women Behind Tech's Self-Made Men," featured my story alongside others, highlighting the systematic erasure of women's contributions in male-dominated industries. It struck a chord, garnering attention far beyond the tech publications where it first appeared. I began receiving emails from women in similar situations, wives and girlfriends who had supported partners through medical school or law school, or MBA programs, only to find themselves discarded once the hard years were behind them. Some sought legal advice, which I directed to Jessica. Others simply wanted acknowledgement that their experiences were real and their anger justified. In response, I established a small nonprofit alongside my scholarship fund, providing resources and community for women rebuilding their lives after relationships where their contributions had been systematically devalued. We offered legal referrals, educational counseling, and, most importantly, a space where these women's stories were heard and validated. 2 years into my program at Northwestern, with my thesis nearing completion and the Emily Project gaining recognition in digital humanities circles, I received another unexpected communication. This time, a LinkedIn request from Olivia Chen Curiosity led me to accept, and a message followed almost immediately. "I owe you an apology. Coffee sometime?" We met at a quiet cafe near campus, the awkwardness of our situation hanging between us as we exchanged stilted pleasantries. Olivia looked different from the polished, intimidating woman I remembered. Still beautiful, but somehow more subdued, more human. "I want to be clear," she said, after we'd settled with our drinks. "I'm not here to justify what happened or to ask for forgiveness. I've been doing a lot of reflection since everything fell apart, and I needed to acknowledge my role in hurting you." I studied her, searching for signs of insincerity but finding none. "I appreciate that. It couldn't have been easy to reach out." "It wasn't," she admitted with a small smile. "But necessary. For my own growth, if nothing else." She took a sip of her tea. "I've left the tech industry, actually. I'm getting my MBA at Kellogg now." "That's unexpected," I said, genuinely surprised. "You seemed very established in your career." I was. But after watching what happened with Daniel, how quickly everyone turned on him, how disposable we all ultimately were to the companies we gave everything to, I started questioning the culture I'd bought into. She paused. "Also, dating someone. Elsa's husband tends to force some uncomfortable self-examination." I couldn't help but laugh at her bluntness. I imagine it would. Our conversation continued for nearly 2 hours, evolving from awkward apology to something approaching genuine exchange. Olivia shared insights about the internal dynamics of Daniel's company that I'd never been privy to. I told her about my academic pursuits and the Emily project. As we prepared to leave, she hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about what might have happened if the acquisition had gone through? If you hadn't discovered the divorce papers?" I considered the question seriously. Sometimes, I might still be in California playing a role that was slowly hollowing me out. Or maybe I would have discovered the truth later, when the stakes were even higher. I shrugged. Either way, I'm grateful for how things turned out. Not the pain or betrayal, but the opportunity to reclaim my life. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. "For what it's worth, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And from everything you've shared today, it sounds like you're thriving." Walking home afterward, I reflected on the strange turns my life had taken, how the greatest betrayal I'd ever experienced had ultimately propelled me toward a future more authentic and fulfilling than the one I'd sacrificed so much to build with Daniel. That evening, as Michael and I prepared dinner in my apartment, a comfortable routine we'd established over the past year, I told him about the meeting with Olivia. "That must have been surreal," he said, chopping vegetables with the precise attention he brought to everything. "It was," I agreed, stirring the risotto he'd taught me to make. "But also oddly healing. Like closing a loop I didn't realize was still open." He set down his knife, turning to face me. "You're remarkable. You know that? Most people would have been consumed by bitterness after what you went through. Instead, you've built something meaningful from the wreckage." I felt my cheeks warm at his praise. "I've had help. Good friends, a supportive sister, an insightful therapist." I bumped his hip with mine. "A patient English professor who makes excellent risotto." He smiled, pulling me closer. "I love you, Rachel Turner. Every complex, resilient, brilliant part of you." The words, spoken for the first time between us, settled in my chest like a warm stone. "I love you too," I replied, surprised by how easy it was to say, how true it felt. Later that night, lying beside Michael in the peaceful darkness, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 years ago, the coffee shop barista who had written her number on a cup, believing love meant subsuming herself in someone else's dreams. That woman was gone, transformed through fire into someone stronger, clearer, more fully herself. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won, but as I drifted toward sleep, I felt only gratitude for the path that had led me here, to this life that was, finally and completely my own. 3 years into my new life in Chicago, I stood, nervously outside the university auditorium where I would be defending my thesis. My fingers fidgeted with the small, polished stone Michael had given me that morning. A worry stone, he'd called it, pressing it into my palm with a kiss for luck. "You're going to be brilliant," he'd assured me. "You know this material better than anyone." Now, as I watched faculty members and fellow students file into the room, I tried to channel that confidence. My thesis committee included professors from 3 departments: literature, computer science, and linguistics, a reflection of how the Emily project had evolved beyond its original scope. Emily, my sister, not the algorithm, arrived with her, husband and daughter in tow. Lily, now a precocious 5-year-old who immediately demanded to sit in the front row to see Aunt Rachel be a doctor. "Not quite a doctor yet, sweetheart," I corrected, kneeling to her level. "This is just one step in the process." "But you're gonna win, right?" Lily asked with a child's straightforward logic. I laughed. "It's not exactly about winning. It's about showing that my research has value." Jessica arrived next, having rescheduled a court appearance to attend. "Wouldn't miss this for anything," she said, hugging me tightly. "From divorce papers to doctoral defense. Quite the journey." "Not quite doctoral," I clarified. "Just master's for now." "For now," Jessica emphasized with a knowing smile. "We both know you're not stopping here." She was right, of course. The success of the Emily project had already prompted discussions about continuing into a PhD program with potential funding from a digital humanities initiative. What had begun as a fresh start had evolved into a genuine passion, opening doors I'd never imagined for myself. Professor Winters, my primary advisor, appeared in the hallway, clipboard in hand. "Ready, Rachel. We're all set to begin." I took a deep breath, squeezing the worry stone once more before slipping it into my pocket. As ready as I'll ever be. The defense itself passed in a blur of focused concentration. I presented my research on using computational analysis to track emotional patterns in 19th century literature, demonstrating how Emily could identify subtle shifts in tone and sentiment that often eluded traditional close reading. The questions from my committee were challenging but fair, probing the boundaries of my methodology and the broader implications of my findings. When it was over, when Professor Winters announced that I had successfully defended my thesis with distinction, the room erupted in applause. Lily's cheer was the loudest of all, her small voice carrying with unrestrained pride. "That's my aunt. She totally won." The celebration dinner afterward, at a restaurant Michael had reserved near the lake, brought together the various threads of my new life: academic colleagues, friends from my nonprofit work, Emily and her family, Jessica, and her partner. Michael's parents had even driven in from Michigan for the occasion, having embraced me with a warmth that still sometimes caught me off guard. "A toast," Michael said, rising as dessert was served. "To Rachel, who reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim your path, to pursue your passions, to become the author of your own story." The words resonated through me as glasses clinked around the table. Author of my own story. Yes, that was exactly what I'd become. Later that night, as Michael and I walked along the lakeshore, the city lights reflecting on the water, he suddenly stopped, turning to face me. "I've been waiting for the right moment for this," he said, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic note of nervousness. "And I think this might be it." Before I realized what was happening, he was kneeling on one knee, holding a small velvet box. "Rachel Turner, you are the most remarkable person I've ever known. The way you've rebuilt your life, the compassion you show to others even after your own pain, your brilliant mind and generous heart. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." He opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant ring. "Would you consider building the next chapter with me as partners in every sense?" I stared down at him, momentarily speechless. After the collapse of my marriage to Daniel, I'd assumed that chapter of my life was closed forever, that I might find companionship, even love, but never again risk the vulnerability of marriage. Yet here was Michael, offering something fundamentally different from what I'd had before, not absorption into his life, but partnership in creating something new together. "I know what you're thinking," he said when my silence stretched. "And I want you to know that I'm not asking you to give up anything. Not your name, not your autonomy, not your dreams. I'm just asking for the chance to walk beside you, whatever path you choose." The tears that filled my eyes surprised me. "Yes," I whispered, then again, more firmly. "Yes, I would love to build this next chapter with you." He slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, then stood and pulled me into his arms. As we kissed beneath the Chicago stars, I felt a profound sense of rightness, of having come full circle not to where I began, but to where I was always meant to be. News of our engagement spread quickly through our circles, generating a wave of congratulations and well wishes. Emily immediately appointed herself wedding planner, though I gently reminded her we hadn't yet set a date, or even discussed what kind of ceremony we wanted. "Just something small," I told her over brunch the following weekend. "Intimate, no fuss. Small. Can still be special," she insisted. "And after everything, don't you think you deserve a real celebration?" I understood what she meant. My wedding to Daniel had been a courthouse affair, followed by pizza in our tiny apartment, partly due to our limited finances at the time, but also because Daniel had been eager to formalize our relationship without the unnecessary expense of a traditional ceremony. "We'll see," I conceded, knowing Emily wouldn't let the matter drop. "But first, Michael and I need to figure out living arrangements. His lease is up next month, and my place is really too small for both of us." "You could look in our neighborhood," Emily suggested eagerly. "There's that Victorian that just went on the market a few blocks from us. 3 bedrooms, garden, walking distance to the park. On a professor's salary and a graduate student's stipend?" I laughed. "I don't think so." Emily gave me a pointed look. "Rachel, you're literally a millionaire. When are you going to start acting like it?" It was true, of course. Despite the substantial funds I'd invested in my scholarship program and nonprofit, the bulk of my settlement remained untouched, growing steadily under the management of the financial advisor Jessica had recommended. I lived comfortably but modestly, still adjusting to the reality that money was no longer a constant concern. "It feels strange," I admitted, "using that money for something so personal, like I haven't earned it." "Earned it?" Emily's voice rose incredulously. "You worked double shifts for years while Daniel pursued his dreams. You uprooted your entire life for his career. You supported him emotionally, financially, practically through every step of building that company. If anyone has earned that money, it's you." Her vehemence made me smile. "Point taken. I'll talk to Michael about the Victorian." Michael, as it turned out, had similar reservations about living in a home purchased primarily with my settlement money. "It's not about pride," he explained, as we toured the house, which was even more beautiful than Emily had described. "It's about balance. I want to contribute equally to our life together." "But equal doesn't have to mean identical," I countered, running my hand along the intricately carved banister. "You contribute in countless ways that aren't financial. Besides, what matters is that we both feel at home there, that it's ours, regardless of who paid what." We compromised in the end. I purchased the house, but Michael insisted on covering all renovation costs and contributing to a joint household account. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it reflected our commitment to building a partnership that honored both our needs and our individual circumstances. As we settled into our new home, transforming it room by room into a space that reflected our shared aesthetic, I found myself thinking often about the contrast with my life in San Francisco. There, I had inhabited a house designed and furnished without my input, a physical manifestation of my peripheral role in Daniel's world. Here, every decision, from the color of the kitchen cabinets to the arrangement of the garden beds, was made together, each choice a small affirmation of our equal stake in creating this shared life. 3 months after my thesis defense, as we were finalizing wedding plans for a small ceremony in the Chicago Botanic Garden, I received an unexpected email from a name I hadn't seen in my inbox for years. Daniel Whitman. Subject: Emily Patent Application. Rachel, I hope this finds you. Well, I recently learned through industry connections about the success of the Emily algorithm in academic circles. Congratulations. It's impressive work that deserves recognition. I've been informed that Northwestern is preparing a patent application for the technology. While I fully support this and make no claim to ownership, I wanted to ensure you're aware that my name should not appear anywhere on the application. The intellectual foundation of this project was always yours, and my contribution was merely technical implementation of your insights. I've attached a formal letter confirming this, which you can share with the university's legal team if helpful. They may reach out to verify, which I'm happy to accommodate. On a personal note, I heard about your engagement. I'm genuinely happy for you. You deserve every happiness. Best regards, Daniel. I stared at the screen, reading the message twice to ensure I hadn't misunderstood. The Daniel I'd been married to would never have voluntarily relinquished credit for something with commercial potential. This unexpected gesture of generosity, or perhaps justice, caught me completely off guard. Everything okay? Michael asked, noticing my expression as he entered our home office with coffee. I turned the screen toward him. From Daniel, about the Emily project. Michael read the email, his eyebrows rising. That's surprisingly decent of him. Yes, I agreed softly. It is. I forwarded the email to Professor Winters and the university's technology transfer office, then drafted a brief reply to Daniel. Thank you for this. It's both unexpected and appreciated. I'm glad to know Northwestern won't encounter any complications with the patent process. Life in Chicago is good, fulfilling in ways I never anticipated. I hope you found similar satisfaction in Boston. Best, Rachel. His response came the next day, brief but sincere. I'm getting there. Different path than I imagined, but maybe the right one. The startup is small but meaningful. Educational tools for underserved schools. No billion-dollar exit on the horizon, but work that matters. Congratulations again on your engagement and all your success. You were always the stronger one between us. DEI. I closed the email without replying, feeling a chapter truly end. Whatever. Complex emotions I still harbored toward Daniel, resentment, disappointment, the ghost of what had once been love. They no longer held power over my present or future. He had become, simply, a person from my past, neither demon nor saint, just a flawed human who had made mistakes and was perhaps, in his own way, trying to make amends. 2 weeks later, I stood in a sunlit corner of the Botanic Gardens Rose Pavilion, watching as our small gathering of friends and family took their seats. My dress, a simple sheath in pale blue rather than traditional white, had been designed by Emily's friend, the same one who had created my statement gown for the acquisition gala years ago. Ready? Emily asked, adjusting the small wreath of flowers in my hair. No cold feet? I smiled, feeling surprisingly calm. Not even slightly chilly. This feels right, in a way I never expected to feel again. That's because it is right, she said, squeezing my hand. He sees you, Rachel. The real you. Not what you can do for him, not how you fit into his plan. Just you. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, with vows we had written ourselves. Promises. Not of blind devotion or unquestioning support, but of partnership, respect, growth, and intentional love. When Michael slipped the simple gold band onto my finger to join my engagement ring, his hands were steady, his eyes clear with certainty. "I now pronounce you partners in life," declared the celebrant, a friend from Michael's department with a sideline in officiating weddings. Equal in commitment, bound by choice rather than obligation, walking forward together by mutual consent and shared purpose. As we turned to face our cheering friends and family, Michael leaned close to whisper, "In my ear, best decision I ever made." I squeezed his hand in agreement, overwhelmed by the journey that had led me to this moment. From the exhausted barista working double shifts to support someone else's dreams, to the woman standing here now, surrounded by people who valued her. For exactly who she was, embarking on a partnership founded on mutual respect rather than sacrifice. The reception flowed seamlessly into evening, with dinner served at long tables in the garden's terrace area, string lights twinkling overhead. As dusk settled, Jessica gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure, skillfully avoiding direct mentions of my past while celebrating the resilience that had brought me to this new beginning. "To Rachel and Michael," she concluded, raising her glass, "who remind us that sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after we think the story is over." Later, as Michael and I danced beneath the stars, I felt a contentment so profound it bordered on disbelief, as if this happiness might dissolve at any moment, revealing itself as a dream rather than my actual life. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked, noting my expression. "That I never expected to be here," I admitted. "After everything fell apart with Daniel, I thought I was done with marriage, done with trusting someone that completely." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "And now I realize what I was missing before, that true partnership doesn't require disappearing into someone else's life. It means building something new together, where both people remain whole." Michael smiled, pulling me closer. "That's exactly what we're doing." The fall semester brought new developments in both our professional lives. Michael received tenure, ending years of uncertainty about his academic future. I was formally accepted into Northwestern's interdisciplinary PhD program, with a focus on digital humanities and computational approaches to literary analysis. Meanwhile, the patent application for Emily proceeded smoothly, with the university's technology transfer, office projecting significant interest from educational technology companies once the patent was secured. As the primary developer, I would receive a percentage of any licensing revenue, an unexpected financial windfall that I immediately earmarked for expanding my scholarship program. The nonprofit I'd established had grown beyond its initial scope, now offering not just resources and community for women rebuilding after relationships where their contributions had been devalued, but also professional development workshops, legal clinics, and partnerships with educational institutions providing re-entry pathways for women whose careers had been interrupted. "You've built something remarkable here," Jessica commented during one of our monthly advisory board meetings. "Something that's changing lives in tangible ways." "We've built it," I corrected, acknowledging the team of dedicated volunteers and part-time staff who had helped transform my personal experience into a broader mission. One crisp October evening, as Michael and I walked home from a faculty dinner, he broached a subject we'd been circling for months. "Have you given any more thought to what we discussed about starting a family?" I had, in fact, been thinking about it constantly, weighing the demands of my academic program against the deep desire that had surprised me with its intensity. At 34, I was acutely aware of the biological clock that feminist theory acknowledged while rightly critiquing. "I have," I admitted, "and I think I'm ready. Or as ready as anyone ever is for something that changes everything." Michael's face lit up with barely contained joy. "Really? You're sure? Because we can wait if you need more time, if you want to finish your program first." I shook my head, smiling at his immediate shift to accommodation. The program will still be there. And honestly, there's never going to be a perfect time. But this feels right, building our family while we're building everything else. We decided to begin trying immediately, without putting pressure on the process or setting rigid timelines. Still, I found myself unexpectedly emotional when, just before Christmas, a home test confirmed what my body had already been suggesting. "It's positive," I called to Michael, who was waiting anxiously in the bedroom. "We're going to have a baby." His whoop of joy carried through the house as he rushed to the bathroom, lifting me in a careful embrace. "A baby," he repeated, wonder suffusing his voice. "Our baby," I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Due in August, if my calculations are right. As the news spread through our circle, reactions ranged from Emily's ecstatic planning for her role as aunt to Jessica's playful, warning that she expected to be named godmother given everything we've been through together. My colleagues at Northwestern were supportive, helping me adjust my academic timeline to accommodate the expected arrival without derailing my progress. Spring brought another unexpected development, an invitation to speak at a women's leadership conference in San Francisco focused on second acts and career reinvention. The irony of returning to the city where my life had imploded wasn't lost on me, but after discussing it with Michael and my therapist, I decided to accept. It might provide a certain symmetry, my therapist suggested. Returning not as you left, wounded and angry, but as you are now, successful, centered, creating a new life in multiple senses. Michael couldn't accompany me due to end of semester obligations, but Jessica volunteered to join me for moral support. As our plane descended toward San Francisco International, I gazed out at the familiar skyline, surprised by the lack of emotional response. The city that had once represented such pain had become simply a place, beautiful but no longer charged with personal significance. The conference was being held at the Legion of Honor, the very venue where the acquisition gala had taken place 5 years earlier. As Jessica and I approached the neoclassical columns, now transformed for a very different kind of gathering, I felt a moment of déjà vu so powerful it stopped me in my tracks. "You okay?" Jessica asked, concern evident in her voice. I nodded slowly. "Just remembering. The last time I was here, I was about to blow up my husband's billion-dollar acquisition." Jessica laughed, linking her arm through mine. "And now you're back as a keynote speaker, 4 months pregnant, happily remarried, with a patent pending and a PhD in progress. I'd call that a successful revenge plot." "Not revenge," I corrected gently. "Reclamation." My speech that afternoon, delivered to a packed auditorium of women at various stages of personal and professional transition, focused on the difference between sacrifice and investment, between supporting someone else's dreams and abandoning your own. The hardest lesson I had to learn, I told the rapt audience, my hand resting lightly on the small swell of my pregnancy, was that loving someone doesn't require diminishing yourself. That partnership, true partnership, means growing together, not one person withering so the other can bloom. As applause filled the grand hall, I caught sight of a familiar figure slipping quietly toward the exit, Olivia Chen, who had apparently attended my talk without making her presence known. Our eyes met briefly across the distance, and she offered a small nod of acknowledgement before disappearing through the door. Later, at the reception, I was approached by dozens of women eager to share their own stories or ask for advice. One in particular, a young woman with the same determined expression I recognized from my own mirror years ago, made a particular impression. "I'm working 2 jobs while my fiancé finishes law school," she confided. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm setting myself up for exactly what happened to you." I considered her question carefully, recognizing its weight. "Supporting someone you love isn't inherently wrong," I said finally. "The problem comes when that support isn't reciprocal, when your dreams are consistently set aside for theirs. Ask yourself, Does he see your goals as equally important? When you talk about the future, is your professional fulfillment part of the conversation? Does he recognize the sacrifices you're making and acknowledge his own responsibility to reciprocate? She nodded thoughtfully. Those are good questions. I'm not sure I know all the answers yet. Then those are conversations worth having before you move forward, I suggested. Not to test him or issue ultimatums, but to ensure you're truly building a partnership, one where both people have the space and support to pursue their fullest potential. As Jessica and I left the museum that evening, the setting sun casting long shadows across the courtyard, I felt an unexpected sense of completion, as if some restless energy that had been driving me forward had finally settled into peaceful purpose. You know what's funny? I said as our car wound through the city toward our hotel. For years after leaving San Francisco, I carried this place with me, all the pain and betrayal and anger. But being back here now, I realize it doesn't have any power over me anymore. It's just a city, a beautiful one, but just a place on a map. Jessica smiled, squeezing my hand. That's how you know you've truly moved on, when the places and people that once hurt you become neutral again. That night, back in my hotel room, I called Michael to share the day's events. As we talked, I stood by the window, gazing out at the city lights, one hand resting on my growing belly where our child was just beginning to make their presence known with tiny, fluttering movements. I wish you could have been there, I told him. It felt like coming full circle in a way, returning to where everything fell apart, but as a completely different person. Not completely different, Michael said, his voice warm even through the distance. The core of who you are was always there. Your intelligence, your compassion, your resilience. You just needed the space to reclaim those parts of yourself. As we said our goodnights, promising to see each other in just 2 more days, I remained by the window, watching the fog roll in across the bay, shrouding the city in its mystical embrace. In that quiet moment, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful journey that had led me here. Not because the pain itself had value, but because without it, I might never have discovered the strength that had always existed within me, waiting for the chance to emerge. My hand moved in small circles over my belly, connecting with the new life growing there, a life that would enter a world fundamentally different from the one I had known at their age. A world where I hoped they would never learn to make themselves smaller for someone else's comfort, never mistake self-erasure for love. You'll know your own worth from the beginning, I whispered to my unborn child. That's my promise to you. That's my legacy. And as the fog enveloped the city where I had once lost myself, I turned away from the window toward the future waiting to be written, a future entirely, irrevocably my own. 5 years had passed since that night in San Francisco, when I'd stood at the hotel window, making silent promises to my unborn child. Now, on a crisp autumn morning in Chicago, I watched that same child, my daughter Eliza, chase falling leaves across our backyard, her laughter carrying on the breeze. "Mommy, look! I caught a red one," she called, holding up her prize with 4-year-old Triumph. "Beautiful!" I applauded from the porch, where I was grading papers while Michael prepared Sunday breakfast. Our second child, 11-month-old James, was napping upstairs, monitored by the baby camera propped beside my stack of student essays. The past 5 years had unfolded with a richness I couldn't have imagined that day in the coffee shop when I'd impulsively written my number on Daniel's cup. I'd completed my PhD the previous spring, officially becoming Dr. Rachel Turner, with a dissertation that expanded the Emily Project into new domains of computational literary analysis. The patent had been approved and licensed to several educational technology companies, generating steady royalty income that continued to fund my scholarship program. My nonprofit had grown into a nationally recognized organization with chapters in 12 cities, providing resources and community for women rebuilding their lives after relationships where their contributions had been systematically devalued. We'd recently been featured in a major women's magazine, bringing a fresh wave of donations and volunteers. Michael had been named department chair last year, a position he approached with the same thoughtful dedication he brought to everything. Our partnership remained steady and equal, each of us taking turns stepping forward or back as our professional demands ebbed and flowed. When Eliza was born, he'd taken a semester's leave to be her primary caregiver while I finished crucial research. When James arrived during my final dissertation push, I'd barely missed a beat, thanks to Michael's unwavering support and our carefully balanced childcare arrangements. "Breakfast is ready," Michael called from the kitchen. "Eliza, come wash your hands." Our daughter raced inside, her cheeks flushed with cold and excitement, a collection of colorful leaves clutched in her small fist. "Can I put these in a book? Like the flowers we pressed last spring?" "Absolutely," I said, gathering my papers. "We'll do it after breakfast." At the table, as we passed plates of pancakes and fresh fruit, I found myself pausing to absorb the simple perfection of this moment. My family gathered in the warm kitchen of our Victorian home. Sunday morning sunlight streaming through the stained glass window we'd discovered behind drywall during renovations. "You're doing it again," Michael observed with a gentle smile. "What?" "That thing where you freeze like you're taking a mental photograph." I laughed, caught. "Can you blame me? This is—" I gestured around the table, at a loss for words adequate to capture what I felt. "I know," he said simply, understanding as he always did. Later that afternoon, while the children napped and Michael prepared for his classes, I sat in my home office reviewing the final edits for my book, Reclaiming Value, Women's Unseen Contributions in Technology and Beyond, scheduled for publication in the spring. The manuscript had evolved from a series of essays I'd written about my experience with Daniel and the stories I'd collected through my nonprofit work. My phone chimed with an email notification. The sender's name made me pause. Ethan Whitman, Daniel's son from his new marriage? I did the math quickly. The boy would be about 4 now, the same age as Eliza. Daniel had remarried 2 years after our divorce to a fellow developer at his Boston educational technology startup. I'd seen the wedding announcement online and felt nothing but a distant wish for his happiness. I opened the email cautiously. "Dear Dr. Turner, you don't know me, but my father is Daniel Whitman. I'm writing because Dad is in the hospital. He had a heart attack last week. The doctors say he's stable now, but it was serious. Before you delete this, please know he didn't ask me to contact you. Mom doesn't even know I'm writing. But I found your book manuscript on his desk. He received an advance copy as a professional courtesy, I think. It was marked up with notes, and he seemed to be writing some kind of response. He told me once that he made terrible mistakes with someone who helped him succeed, and that he hopes I grow up to be better than he was. I think he was talking about you. I know this is weird coming from a stranger, but if you could send him a message or something, I think it might help him recover faster. He respects you a lot. Sincerely, Ethan Whitman." I stared at the screen, processing this unexpected connection from my past. After a moment's hesitation, I pulled up my contacts and placed a call I hadn't made in years. "Rachel?" Daniel's voice sounded weaker than I remembered, but the surprise in it was evident. "Did Ethan contact you?" "He did," I admitted. "I'm sorry. About your heart attack. How are you feeling?" "Better than I deserve," he said with a faint laugh that turned into a cough. "Sorry. Still recovering." "Your son seems very thoughtful," I offered, "reaching out to a stranger on your behalf." "He's remarkable," Daniel agreed, pride warming his tone. "Much more emotionally intelligent than I was at his age. Or any age, really." An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of our shared history. "Ethan mentioned you have an advance copy of my book," I said finally. "Yes," Daniel confirmed. "Your publisher sent it for a potential blurb. I was trying to find the right words. And I wanted to acknowledge the truth of your account without seeming self-serving or defensive. It's a powerful book. Rachel, It will help a lot of people recognize patterns they might be trapped in. His sincerity caught me off guard. Thank you. That means something, coming from you. I've been following your work from a distance, he continued. The nonprofit, the Emily Project, your academic career. You've built something meaningful. Everything you always wanted to do before we took a different path, I finished for him, unwilling to rehash old wounds. Yes, he said quietly. A path that ultimately led you where you needed to be, even if the journey was harder than it should have been. I glanced at the framed photo on my desk. Eliza and James with Michael and me at the lake last summer, all of us laughing as waves crashed around our knees. I'm happy, Daniel, I said simply. Truly happy. I know, he replied. I am too, in a different way than I expected. The startup isn't making millions, but we're helping schools and underserved communities implement technology that actually improves learning outcomes. And being Ethan's father, it's changed everything about how I see the world. We talked for a few more minutes about his recovery plans, about the educational technology field where our professional interests still occasionally overlapped, about nothing in particular. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation or an emotional purging, just a quiet conversation between two people who had once known each other intimately and now existed in separate orbits, connected only by the gravity of shared history. I should let you rest, I said eventually. Take care of yourself, Daniel. You too, Rachel, and thank you for picking up the phone. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. There was no anger left, no resentment, just a peaceful acknowledgement that every step of my journey, even the painful ones, had led me exactly where I was meant to be. That evening, after the children were asleep, Michael and I sat on our back porch with glasses of wine, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. I talked to Daniel today, I said, breaking our comfortable silence. His son reached out. Daniel had a heart attack last week. Michael turned to me, his expression concerned but not jealous or threatened. Is he okay? Recovering. It was good, actually. Talking to him. Like closing a circle that had one last gap. Michael nodded, understanding as always. You've come a long way from that night at the gala. We've come a long way, I corrected, reaching for his hand. I couldn't have rebuilt without you, not just supporting me, but seeing me. Really seeing me. He squeezed my fingers gently. You were always there to be seen. Some of us are just better at looking. The following spring, my book was published to critical acclaim and surprising commercial success. The day it hit the bestseller list, I received a simple card in the mail, no return address, just a single line in familiar handwriting. You always were the strongest one. Thank you for showing others how to find their strength too. I didn't need a signature to know who had sent it. I placed the card in my desk drawer, a final artifact from a chapter long closed. 10 years to the day after I had discovered those divorce papers in Daniel's briefcase, I stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing a congressional committee on women's economic empowerment. My testimony drew on both personal experience and the data we'd gathered through a decade of work with my nonprofit. The most insidious form of inequality, I told the assembled lawmakers, isn't always the obvious discrimination we can legislate against. It's the subtle expectation that women's dreams, ambitions, and contributions are secondary, supporting characters in someone else's success story rather than protagonists in their own. As cameras flashed and questions followed, I felt a profound sense of having come full circle, from the exhausted barista working double shifts to support someone else's ambitions to a respected voice advocating for systemic change. That night, in my hotel room, I video called home, smiling as Eliza and James crowded the screen, eager to share their day's adventures with Michael at the Science Museum. Their faces, his steady presence, were the truest measure of how far I'd come. Later, as I stood by the hotel window looking out at the Capitol's illuminated monuments, I reflected on the strange, winding path that had led me here. Working jobs to put my husband through college hadn't been a mistake. The mistake had been forgetting that I deserved the same investment in return. The love I'd given hadn't been wrong. The problem was loving someone who couldn't value it properly. In the end, karma had indeed had other plans for both of us. Daniel had lost the acquisition that would have made him a billionaire, but found meaningful work and a family where he was learning to be a better man. And I had lost a marriage built on unequal sacrifice, but gained a life rich with purpose, partnership, and genuine fulfillment. As I turned from the window toward bed, my phone lit up with a message from Michael. "Remember the first time we met? At that cafe? I knew then you were going to change the world. So proud of you today." I smiled, typing back. "The world's still a work in progress, but our piece of it? I'd say we've built something beautiful." And we had. Not just a family or a home or successful careers, but something far more precious. A life where both of us could shine, where sacrifice was mutual and temporary, rather than expected and endless, where love amplified rather than diminished. It wasn't the future I'd imagined when I'd written my number on a coffee cup all those years ago. It was infinitely better. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.